are you saying that US federal government is behind the attempt to tarnish Adani? And if so, what's the end game there?
You must understand that when this kind of a case comes up, I can see the attempt to kill two birds with one stone. The US, when it perceives you as working against its interests, will trump up charges. We can explain why every country in the world in the last 3 years has moved to cryptocurrency to escape the US's snooping eyes. In India, the only player who's building India's infrastructure is Adani.
Hi, you're watching The Times of India. I'm Aditi Prasad, and today we are joined by journalist, author, and researcher Arin Bhaskar, and we are going to talk about the allegations made against the Adani Group in the United States. Now, Mr. Bhaskar is in a special place to talk about this, given that he's written a book on Adani, on Gautam Adani, and how he reimagined business in India here and globally. And the book came out last year, of course. And Mr. Bhaskar, the Adani Group has denied the US charges as baseless. And many legal experts believe too that the charges are trumped up and the allegations lack substance. What is your understanding?
Okay, I'd like to explain this in three parts. Okay, the first part, you have to go back to the time when the Iran crisis took place. While the US has always been sanctioning countries one after another, sanctions took a new meaning when America imposed sanctions against Iran, because that was the time when it weaponized the dollar. How did it weaponize the dollar? Because the dollar is a fiat currency. If I want to buy rubles, I have to first convert my rupees to dollars, and from dollars to rubles. If I want to buy dirhams, my rupees go to the dollar and then to dirhams, and vice versa. The dollar remains the mode through which all transactions take place. And the US discovered that because the dollar was a medium, they could actually monitor every transaction in the world. And through the large computers, they could track every transaction, the source and the recipient. Effectively, the US had a file on every person in the world and could excavate the data. It could data mine the information whenever it wanted. We suspected it. And then came the second revelation in July 2023, when Sergei Lavrov was in India. Sergei Lavrov is the foreign minister for Russia. And at the Rise in a Hill conference, he made a public statement. When someone asked him why countries did not vote with Russia, Lavrov said that's because the US makes sure that countries vote the way the US wants them to vote. And then he explained that there are times when ministers and bureaucrats ask the USA, what if we don't vote with you? And the USA shamelessly tells them, well, we could create trouble for you. And Lavrov goes on to say how US representatives go to almost every bureaucrat or minister they want to persuade or coerce and tell them, look, we know that you've got a bank account in this place and this is the amount. We also know that your son or your daughter studied such and such a university.
Hmm.
In other words, they have information, a dossier on everybody who has to play a part the US wants them to play.
That's a
Which in a
very
way can explain why every country in the world in the last 3 years has moved to cryptocurrency to escape the US's snooping eyes. Even in India, while the Reserve Bank of India had recommended that cryptocurrency be banned, the government said, no, you're studying the situation further because cryptocurrency is the only way you can transfer money without the US knowing about it. That's
America weaponizing the financial transactions. That's a fairly serious accusation. Are there any other recent examples that you can possibly talk about apart from Mr. Adani? And there is, of course, Russia.
well. In a way, you must understand that that is one of the reasons why the BRICS wants a separate currency. Because America weaponized the dollar in the case of Iran. After that, it weaponized the US financial system when it threw Russia out of the SWIFT system.
Yeah.
And Russia could not transact anything because it was out of the SWIFT. And that is why the BRICS countries now want to create a separate currency market, a separate currency exchange. And one of the ideas that has been talked about is the gold-based currency back to a pre-Bretton Woods, where gold becomes a standard. Well, how it will shape out is something that's been discussed internally. Let's see how it goes.
De-dollarization is something that everybody is talking about. Most countries
Yes,
are talking about. Yes, I get that. I understand. But as I pointed out, that's a fairly serious accusation.
yes.
Many turn around and ask that are you saying that U.S. federal government is behind the attempt to tarnish Adani, and if so, what's the end game there?
Okay, now let's go to the third stage. The US, as I said, has a dossier on everybody, but decides to pull out a dossier only when it wants. So why did it pick up Adani of all the people? There are bigger fish in the market which transact money, and the US does nothing about it. There are bigger crimes that have been committed in the world, but the US does not do anything about it. Under its influence, the ICJ decides the UN, the UN Legal Crime, War Crimes Committee decides to sanction and blacklist Russian generals for war crimes. It forgets. It does not want to indict anyone in Israel. Similarly, if you go back a few years, the US claims only about 30,000 people died in Iraq, while a Lancet survey shows that 665,000 people died. If there's anyone who has to be sanctioned, and declared as war criminals, it is George Bush first.
So, let's talk about the allegations against Mr. Adani per se. Since you understand his business, you've written a book about his business, both in India and globally. Um, on the substance of these allegations by the US prosecutors.
Look, when you talk about the US charges here first, no person is guilty unless proven guilty. Every person is innocent till that time. Two, if you really had some questions to ask, why did you not send them a show cause notice? Ask him to explain before trying to tarnish him. The manner in which it was done directly from the Department of Justice to an indictment suggests that it was not clear, it was not that simple of a simple routine law and order matter. Point three, the world knows that when a country is developing, and this is true of every country which is developing, money changes hands. Whether money changes hands here in Adani's case or not remains to be seen. But look at the robber barons. Look at the oil industry. Look at the way the railroads are built in America. Look at the way the banking system was distorted by the Rothschilds. Everywhere you have someone bribing everyone across the counter to make sure that the industry is set up. In India, the only player who's building India's infrastructure is Adani in a massive way. For 70 years, you have been ignored infrastructure. No big industrialist gets into infrastructure because of risks involved. And the risks are manifold. And in the book, I've explained a whole chapter on what makes an India create an Ambani or an Adani.
Can the Indian government ask the US prosecutors for proof in this case? Should they ask for proof? What are the next steps in this case?
Well, firstly, Adanis have refused to say that have refused to admit any complicity in this crime or in this alleged crime. Point two, the process is wrong, and when the process is wrong, the case is wrong. Okay, that's the second reason. The third, you must understand that when this kind of a case comes up, I can see the attempt to kill two birds with one stone. It's being done to tarnish Adani, the man who's building India's infrastructure, make it leapfrog into the big boys club. You can't build a country without infrastructure. And the second, it's trying to attack the present government because the government is about to mend relations with China. When Bangladesh tried to mend relations with China, look at what happened. The US, when it perceives you as working against its interests, will trump up charges left, right, center. Remember the arrest that US asked Canada to enforce against the daughter of the chairman of Huawei? Remember the arrest, the what's the attempted arrest and jailing of Assange or Snowden? Whenever the US perceives anyone as acting against the US interest, they go hammer and tong and even use the entire media to tarnish the target. Take another example. In 2008, on February 1st, 2008, there was an 8-page document submitted by William Burns, who was then the US ambassador to Russia. The document is classified. The title of the document was Niet means Niet. NYT means no. No means no.
Yeah.
The document said in 2008 that if NATO tries to go eastwards, expect Russia to be provoked into having a war. So when America says it was an unprovoked attack, it's lying. The US lies all the time when anyone goes against its interests. This document was secret till Assange leaked it through WikiLeaks, and today it's public. It's available. It's an 8-page document which is damning.
And William Burns is now the director of CIA.
Yes, William Burns is now currently the director of CIA. And he's keeping quiet.
Right. The US President-elect Donald Trump has not had a great innings with this whole weaponization of the government, so the US government, so to speak, because he's been talking about it. He's spoken about it quite openly. There have been charges against him, which have now been dropped since he's the president-elect. He's claimed that the US government spent over $100 million in trying to target him using state prosecutors and district attorneys.
Exactly. Even the current attempt to send long-range missiles into Ukraine, even when the term is coming to an end, is an attempt by the US government, the deep state, to make sure that things become difficult for Trump. And why? Because the deep state wants the war to continue. Why? Go to your databases and check up on BlackRock. The largest holder of mortgages in Ukraine is BlackRock. These were assets that were bought by Americans, and when the war began, they were in distress. They sold them to BlackRock. Social media is rife, and I've not been able to confirm this part, that Biden's own son holds assets in Ukraine.
Do you think that the incoming Trump administration, given his rocky relationship with this previous regime and the charges and the counter charges that are played out, do you think that the incoming Trump administration will drop these charges? Can it drop these charges?
Of course it can. All the cases against Trump have been dropped.
No, drop the charges against Adani, I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm talking about how even the charges against Trump have been dropped. And the incoming president, when he becomes president, he can say that this is not a case to be looked at. It's not in our interests. Geopolitical interests can render all charges, can make all charges look frivolous if the president so decides.
Do you think he will?
I don't see why not. He wouldn't like Modi to go more towards the Chinese. And the US has very, very big interest in India. Of course, like Lavrov said, every minister, every bureaucrat in India is compromised because the US has details on them. So India will have to navigate very carefully, and so will America. It cannot jettison a crucial interest like India in the Asia-Pacific region. Already you have a situation where Russia, China, Iran have joined hands. If India joins hands, it's over.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, sir, and thank you for those insights. Thank you, viewers, for watching this. We'll come back to you with more. Stay tuned to the Times of India.
Thank you very much.